I heard you are going all the way in order to promote traveling in Sweden, even talking about your favorite outdoor activities, sandwich throwing. You're very good.
Yes.
Yearly how many times?
10, 12.
Wow, that's impressive.
Mm-hmm. That's flat stones, and you throw it on the water, on the surface of the water, so like that.
That's
and the
right.
more time you bump, the better. So I am very good.
But I guess doing politics is not as throwing stone leisure as it was. There are a lot of things you have to handle right now, the economy and the welfare nation. Meanwhile, there is also the coalition government that you as the Prime Minister have to deal with every day. What is it like?
You have to be able to negotiate, you have to be focused on the long-term objectives, but at the same time be prepared also to take into consideration other parties' views.
You started as a trade unionist.
That's true.
So jobs actually extremely important for your previous job. And now I guess you have to incorporate that thought with many of the other needs you have to balance as the Prime Minister of your economy and your society. So how is that going to balance? We see some of the country's leaders making very different choices as a result of that.
Now, I keep focus on job and employment. That's number one. But when I talk climate issue, I can also see the job perspective. When we're talking about the welfare, the health care sector, I can also see the job perspective. So all the ministers in my government, they have to also explain what they're doing, what they want to do, right. How does it contribute to decreasing unemployment and increasing employment. I mean, you have to admit, globalization is already here. We have a global economy. You look at the enterprises working all over the globe. Capital is the same, working all over the globe. We have new business models now, and huge enterprises producing in several countries.
So it's a reality.
It is a reality, so let's face that. I mean, you cannot resist that, but we need to be much more clear about this globalization needs to work for everybody. Today we have a situation in the world where perhaps 10, 15 people own as much as 3.5 billion people. And that says something. So the distribution is wrong. So that's what we need to address now, and that is why I launched something called a global deal, meaning that we need now on the global level a social dialogue between employers, employees, but also politicians, the society, the academia, the civil society, on how to make sure that this global economy works for everybody.
But that's only part of your job. The other part is how to do and what to work with the EU, particularly when the EU is facing a temporary challenge of Brexit and its future goals together. What do you think are the biggest potential to be developed between the Nordic countries like you, Sweden, and the EU? Are you really enjoying yourselves while being part of the EU, or mainly contribute to this bloc?
Now, first, the Brexit is of course a failure. Saying something else would be wrong. It is, but directly after the Brexit referendum, we sat down in Bratislava, all the EU 27, and discussed what to do now. And we decided this is not the time to discuss new treaties. This is the time to focus and deliver on what people actually expect from this. So we're focusing now more on employment, not least youth unemployment, because we need to reduce that dramatically because it's a ticking bomb. Security, being both defense and countering terrorism, and also the social aspects, and not least, of course, making sure that we implement the Paris Agreement. So if we just focus and showing people that this is an organization in which there is a clear added value, not least for Sweden. So yes, we do enjoy it. We do see that it is profitable. We gain from this. You know, our export equals to 50% of our GDP. So that says everything.
Yeah. Talking about the Paris Agreement, is the future of the EU pretty much hung on how you are working together about it, and also you are communicating with and working with others outside the EU on that specific one?
Yeah, the Paris Agreement is very important to us as a country, but to EU as well. So last week we had the European Council again in Brussels, and we all stated that this is very important. We need to implement, and EU, we want to be in the very forefront to make sure the Paris Agreement is implemented, because if we do not do that, we know what will happen to our planet, and we cannot take that responsibility.
That's tremendous business opportunities as well.
Indeed, indeed. So that's what's good now, that we have passed a situation, a time where climate issues and working for the environment were regarded as obstacles. They're not. These are opportunities. This is a new technology, the new jobs, and first and foremost, a good environment for our grandchildren as well.
Will that influence your relationship with the United States?
No, basically we have a good relation with the United States. We disagree on this with the administration, of course, and we're sorry that they're pulling out of the Paris Agreement. I think it's a mistake. I'm convinced it is a mistake for the climate issue in itself, but also for the United States. And I believe that is why I believe we have some 12, 13 states now claiming that they will implement the Paris Agreement.
But without national government participation, it's going to be a very different thing.
It'll be different, yes, but still, look at California, a huge state in the United States. They are saying, no, we're going through with this. And I'm convinced that, the rest also will see this is where the future is.
Sweden now is hosting the rotating presidency of the Nordic Council.
Mm-hmm.
China and Sweden can work a lot about that. You said that also during the discussion with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. But the question is how?
It is, and we need to see both these perspectives. When we cooperate in the Arctic Council, for example, what do we see? We see, for example, the climate issue very clear. Because if we do not handle this in a good way, we see the ice melting, and that is something that we need to address. And by doing so, we also understand we need to cooperate on other issues. How do we develop new technology, for example? And that could be both multilateral cooperation, but also bilateral cooperation. So I guess basically we look at the same issues, but from different perspectives, depending on what fora we're talking in. But it concerns the most important things all the time, the issues. And today it is definitely climate and making sure globalization works for everybody.
Mr. Prime Minister, Sweden is one of the very first Western countries to have diplomatic relations with China. The first. All right, there we go. Time changes. Priorities also change. We experienced the Cold War, and now we are in a very different stage. Globalization, new technology. What are some of the options that the two countries could have when it comes to further develop this bilateral relationship?
One being, excuse me if I mention that again, one being the climate issue, because that is number one, to make sure that we can handle this, showing our children and grandchildren once again that they can live in a safe world as well. Another issue is common security. I mean, how do we avoid war? How do we decrease tensions in regions all over the world? And that is, I think, a very strong expression, common security. How do we build common security? We as a country right now, we are increasing our military capacity because it is needed. When we looked in our neighborhood, what's happening, we need to do that. That's important. But the long term, how do we build bridges? How do we develop dialogue so that we decrease tensions? And that, I think, is, I mean, right now we serve for 2 years in the Security Council, also together with China. We have a good dialogue. So I think that's even also a very important. Climate, huge issue. Security, another huge issue. On the global perspective, we need to address that together.
On the security issue, do you have already some specific thoughts about how to develop?
First, we believe that the UN Security Council can be more efficient, more transparent, address more of things before a crisis actually happens. How do we can prevent crisis? Can we work to prevent that with diplomacy, but also with making sure that people, for example, don't have to flee. How do we decrease the number of refugees, meaning that they can actually stay and live a decent life in their own country? Those and the environment again, because those things create tensions, and that is what we need to work on how to prevent those tensions.
And Sweden, with also your leadership, very active in geopolitics and international relations. You met with the great leader in Iran. You also have been subscribing to the two-state solution, the very first among the European countries, I have to say, about that between the Israelis and Palestinians. What are you thinking when it comes to the future role of Sweden?
It is important to do your share, so to speak. We're a small country, yes, but we've always been very active in international politics, and we think it's our obligation to contribute, to do our part. And being a non-aligned country also means that I think that also builds trust, because we do not necessarily serve any other interest, but we're in this because we want to do something good, both with the environment or the security issues or other issues. So we need to be clear on our views, but also respect, of course, others, and as I said, develop a dialogue, a constant dialogue, so we can talk to countries with on difficult issues, express what we see is important, and at the same time also keep the good relationship, the good dialogue, because that is the long-term thinking. You need to have a dialogue in order to achieve something.
Visions and actions.
That's right.
Mr. Prime Minister, what a pleasure to have you on CGTN.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For being
Thank
with
you.
us.
Thank you.